I'm Jenna. I read Five Midnights by Anne Davila Cardinal. This book came out in 2019, and it is a standalone. You can read it by itself, but it also may be the first in the series. She wrote a sequel after this called Category 5. You can read them separately, and you don't have to read them in order, but I have read both, and I would only recommend this one, and I'm going to tell you why. This is a mystery thriller sort of thing, and it does have some crime elements, some murder stuff, so trigger warnings there if you're not comfortable with those. But I'll give you a little overview. Lupe Davila and her father visit her uncle in San Juan every summer. But this year her father is forced to stay behind in Vermont, so Lupe ends up going to Puerto Rico on her own. When she arrives, her uncle, who is chief of police, is investigating the suspicious death of a boy named Vico, found dead in a bad part of town and most likely killed during a drug deal. Vico is friends with Lupe's cousin Izzy, and because of that tenuous connection, she feels compelled to dig deeper and to understand his death. So it basically follows those five teenagers, a group of five teenagers, in their quest to sort of understand this criminal, basically. But it turns out it's a little more supernatural than you might think. So the premise of Five Midnights is set around the legend of El Cuco, which is the boogeyman. And I honestly expected it to be more horror based. Like I thought there would be some more horror elements to the story, but it's actually much more supernatural. I think this book will appeal most to those who enjoy mystery thrillers without anything too scary, because I don't think there was ever a time in this book when I actually felt scared, but the mystery definitely kept me turning pages, and I really, really enjoyed the cultural descriptions of El Cuco and what his story meant and means to Puerto Rican children and families, and the way that they pass down and share that story. So yeah, the supernatural history is the main reason that I'm recommending this one, because the way that Cardinal tells it really kept me intrigued, but again, not scared. So if you're looking for something very scary, probably not for you. But there is a lot to pay attention to in this book. The mystery, the Puerto Rican folklore, teen relationships, social commentary about the realities of living in Puerto Rico, drug use. All those elements balance each other out and make it really fun, but it's also a little tricky. I felt like some of what I was reading wasn't always accurate. Like it paints Puerto Rico, it paints San Juan in a pretty negative light. Most males in the book are criminals. Like, there are very few adult males besides her uncle, who is the chief of police. There's very few males who are not drug dealers, which feels a little, I don't know, maybe a little tone deaf. Like, there's clearly more to Puerto Rico than this negativity. But I think as long as you take it with a grain of salt and just sort of embrace it as a work of fiction, you'll be okay with it. But Lupe, the main character, almost ruined this book for me. She's pretty unbearable. She's a stereotypical teenager who does what she wants and usually makes decisions without thinking. But overall, the really cool folklore kept me in it. I think this book could have been a lot better if it didn't wrap up in the last few pages, but I'm recommending it because those last few pages did have a good twist. So there were a lot of pros and cons with this one, but ultimately I do recommend it because that last twist was sort of the only thing I didn't see coming. But I feel like it could have been even better if they didn't try to tie up all those loose ends so quickly. But still, the writing was beautifully done. I really enjoyed the thorough detailed descriptions of San Juan and El Ruby, but it did make me want to double take and check some facts, because again, Puerto Rico is a very diverse place with such a broad cultural history, it felt wrong to paint it in the light of, drug lords and drug busts. So learn a few things. You'll learn about Puerto Rico. You'll learn about the fact that it's technically a U.S. territory and all the tricky things that go on with that. So I think it's a cool introduction to some of that stuff, but definitely one that I would encourage you to enjoy and then do a little of your own reading after. But yeah, it's a fun one if you want to learn something about a different culture and some spooky supernatural ongoings. 5 Midnights is available at Fountaindale in print, and it's also available on Hoopla as an audiobook.
Hey everybody, my name's Kelsey, and today we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. Shadow of the Fox is a high fantasy novel that is inspired by feudal Japan and Japanese folklore. It is told in dual perspective from our two main characters, Yumeko and Tatsumi, as well as a couple of interludes from one of our villains as well. So our first main character, Yumeko, is half kitsune, which is a Japanese fox spirit. When she was a baby, she was abandoned on the steps of the Silent Winds Temple and has been brought up by monks. Now, one day, the head of the temple asks to speak to Yumeko, and he tells her a story about a man who was once so greedy he tried to steal the jewel from the head of an ancient spirit dragon. However, when he confronted the dragon, he realized that this was an absolutely colossal mistake. And he prayed 1,000 prayers that the dragon might spare him. The dragon was moved by his prayers, and she gave the man a choice. He could either get any wish that his heart desired, or he could go back home safe with his soul intact. Ever since then, every 1,000 years, at the end of an era, the dragon will rise again and offer the person who can recite the 1,000 prayers the same choice that was given the first greedy man. Now, 1,000 prayers is a lot to memorize and pass down, so of course, they were written on a scroll, which was then divided into 3 parts, and each part is in hiding to be protected, because even though the wish is supposed to only be granted to someone with a pure soul, good intentions don't always translate to good results, and there has been more than one mistake in the past. Now, the reason that the monk decided to tell this to Yumeko is because it turns out that the temple where she's spent her whole life is guarding one of these 3 pieces. And the era is coming to a close. The dragon is going to rise, and there is more than one party that is interested in getting its power for themselves. One of these parties is the Shadow Clan, which is where we find our second main character, Tatsumi, who is known as the Kage Demon Slayer. He is a shinobi or ninja that has been raised in order to bear this cursed sword, and in order to do so, he must suppress all human emotion that the demon inside could use as a window to take him over. So Tatsumi is sent to the Silent Winds Temple to steal this scroll. Unfortunately, he's not the first one who gets there. There's a third party who's been summoning demons of her own in order to procure the scroll. And Tatsumi encounters Yumeko fleeing from the scene, not knowing that the very piece of scroll he's looking for is in her bag at the moment. He agrees to escort her to the temple where she says the scroll has been sent. As a fox spirit, or partial fox spirit, she's quite a good liar. I really like this book, one, because I absolutely love Japanese folklore, and 2, I really like that it ends up having this sort of D&D-esque energy to it. In addition to Yumeko and Tatsumi, they actually pick up a couple other party members along the way, including a disgraced ronin and a very practiced shrine maiden, warrior shrine maiden. One of my favorite things is, as they're making this journey, they have a lot of kind of little mini adventures or side quests. One of the ones that is my favorite is they stumble upon a cursed town that was cursed by the spirit of a monk who starved to death in the snow. And I really liked how that story turned out. I think that this book is a really good one for manga fans. or anime fans who are trying to look for a traditional novel to read rather than just manga. It's really, really great for that, especially if you're a fan of anime like Inuyasha or Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba. It's definitely really, really up that alley. And it is available both in hardcover here and at our sister libraries, as well as online on Hoopla. It is the first in a series. There is a total of 3 of them because it is a trilogy. They've all been released, so you can binge them all real quick without having to wait on any cliffhangers. So hopefully you will enjoy, and we will see you next time.